to write this particular book was my husband came back from a trip from America, and he was telling me he watched this comedian. Hello. He was telling me he watched a comedian on TV who was really funny, and how this comedian was saying that when the devil comes to you to corrupt you, he tells you half a truth and the rest is a lie. So, for example, if I always grew up thinking that my sister was prettier than me because she happened to have blonde hair, which she does, right? And the devil wants to turn me against my sister, he'll come up to me and say, your parents always thought she was the golden child because she had blonde. So that's what inspired me to write the story. And as he was telling me about this comedian, the first paragraph just came into my mind, and I immediately wrote it down as he was talking to me. Really well. It's helped me write really quickly, where before I was a bit scared of it because I come from an era back then, dinosaur age, and I first started off with a normal typewriter, and then I advanced to an electronic typewriter, and I thought I was really cool, and and then my husband bought me an Amstrad, which I was scared of for a couple of years before I learned to use that, and then obviously I learned to use a word processor, which I was petrified of for a long time, but now that I know how it works, it's really helped. I can actually keep up with my thoughts when I'm writing. I always holiday in Marbella, and I really love the atmosphere of Spain, and I think Spain is an atmosphere which kind of entices romance, and the sun's always out, and the sea is there, and and people are always happy, so it's a perfect. I love Spain. I always love Spain, and I go to Marbella, and I actually go to the Marbella Beach Resort a lot. So that gives me, not that I've written about anyone in particular, but it gives me a chance to observe, people around me. To have about 20, 30 novels published before I die. None. I don't do that. And the reason why he's asking this is because he's my son.
Actually, the devil was written about me.
Just, it slightly touches on his character. Just slightly. I say to young aspiring writers, I think young aspiring writers are the most interesting writers of all, because they come at the world the way they see the world, and they're not tainted. And they're not tainted by the taboos that us adults are tainted by, because as you get older in life and you get more engrossed in what your traditions and family and society are saying, you change your ways. But when you're young, and I remember being young, being 16, 17, because I've always written, I remember, and the magic young writers have in their fingertips, it far exceeds any older writer, because they're not tainted. The only thing I would say is that obviously with any skill you need to practice, because it's practice makes perfect. There's no other way you can refine your writing unless you keep writing and writing and writing. As you get older, you take your talent and obviously the mistakes you've made and you combine them, and you become much more polished than before. I never ever know a story when I start to write. I always come up with a title before knowing what I'm going to write at all. And if I don't have a title, I can't write. And once I've got a title, what follows usually is if the title jumps out at me. So I have a pen and paper and I write many, many titles until a title and if a title jumps out at me, normally what develops almost immediately after the title jumps up at me is a paragraph, okay? And that paragraph is normally then left to fester in the corner for a few months, and then I just sit and I let it write itself. I don't actually have a plan for my novels. Of course, as I'm going along, as the novel progresses or as the work progresses, then I can actually see, say, for example, where Alvita's going, and so halfway through the book, I've got a rough idea where certain characters will end up. This is the first time I've went down anything which isn't so dark and intense. Ellie Mae is more the style I write, and The Devil's Truth, I didn't struggle, but I found I had to put more thought into the way I was writing it, because I'm not used to writing anything which has, usually I'm used to writing about tragedies in life. I'm not used to writing about anything which has any element of, Ellie Mae had elements of humor, but it was still tragic. But I'm not used to writing about something which is actually comical, which I consider to be comical. So I had to change the way I would write things, the way I'd word things, so that it comes across as more humorous than depressing. I think being a woman draws me more to those themes, and it's not that I had a tragic past or anything, it's just that I've got women's emotions, right? And women are, I'm sure we women will agree with me, women are very deep thinkers, they're very emotional. When women are hurt, they're not, unlike men, if you say something to a man, you've hurt him because you've said something terrible to him, but with women, you say something to a woman and you've hurt her on many levels. You've hurt her on an emotional level, you've hurt her on her, self, on her looks, on her past, on the fact that she's a woman, and so because women have all these complex emotions, nothing's ever straightforward with a woman. Don't ever believe it. What your girlfriend tells you, it's not straightforward. So, so we kind of feel in 3 dimensions. We don't feel in 1 dimension, where guys tend to feel in 1 dimension, hence why, right, the author of Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus.
Yeah, I read that actually.
Yeah. The men don't understand why we can get so angry when they say something to us.
For nothing.
For nothing. Yes, I am. Yeah. In fact, I kind of, the thing is, what people don't realize is it takes me a year to write a novel. You then send it to a publisher, and then it takes a year, if they accept it, for it to come out and be published, and then a year for it to circulate, because there's no point you publishing 2 novels at once. They're not gonna sell. So obviously you're talking about, so the year to write a novel, then you're talking 2 years in between, right? And though it looks to you that the novels are coming out fast, right? Ellie Mae was actually written a few years back. It wasn't written as recently as last year. So I don't sit there twiddling my thumbs. So I have actually written other novels in between, so I've got more novels than what is published at the moment.
Please.
That's if it is to come.
I'm sure it will.
The Devil Meets Ellie Mae.
Oh, I like.
You wish. We already met.
Remember. Okay.
Well, I've written, I'm currently writing one called Ragdoll, which is a very, it's a kind of, again, I'm sorry, reverting back again to kind of, it's a bit comical, but it's more woman, deep, twisty, emotional, psycho, and I've just finished one called Wretched Women. And not to give too much away, it's a group of women, it sounds boring, but it isn't, a group of women in a retirement complex. And as sweet as they look and as, meek as they seem, they all have pasts, and obviously the story then takes you to their pasts. Oh, the character of Ellie Mae. Okay, basically, this is, God's honest truth. I based the character of Ellie Mae on every single woman on the planet, right? In a sense that she's gentle but fierce, she's happy but there's a sadness underlying, you know what I'm saying? she yearns and loves, and yet she hates with a vengeance, you know. So that's basically whom I based her character on. Now, the idea of Ellie Mae is because when I was, it's based in Bayswater. Are you familiar with the novel Ellie Mae?
I've read it, I read it in chapters.
Oh, have you? Okay. So it's based in Bayswater, and where she finds herself in a gang where there are pimps, and she's entrapped in this gang. Yeah? The idea came about because I grew up in Bayswater, and I grew up in Bayswater in the 80s. My favourite author is Faye Weldon, without doubt. I liked her when I was 16, and I came second place in a young authors. I was 16 at school, and I came second place in a young authors competition, and she came presented prizes, right? And I liked her, but I was 16, so I just kind of liked her. I didn't like her very much because she gave first prize to someone else. And then when I was about 18, my dad came home and he said, "Here, my secretary said you should read this," and it was Praxis. Her novel is ages ago, and I couldn't put it down. And after that, I couldn't put any of her books down. And I've read from many other writers, but I always keep coming back to Faye Weldon. I was 12 when I wanted to become a writer, and I used to always walk around with pen and paper. And I used to write short stories and poems, and don't take this the wrong way, I used to have a lot of imaginary friends as well. And I used to be more comfortable with my world of imagination than I was with the world, you know. And yeah, I wanted to become a writer since I was 12. And actually my English teacher, who happened to know a children's publisher back then, had called my father and said, if she can write, you know, 12 stories, short stories, I will, you know, submit them to this children's publisher. But I don't know what happened. I think, you know, Dad didn't pursue it, I didn't pursue it. You know, I was a kid, but I always wanted to be a writer.